Okay, we're moving on to Chapter 3, which the title relates is Recording the Crime Scene, which is basically documenting the crime scene through notes and photography and other means. Okay, crime scene notes. We've already talked about the importance of having a notebook and pen and flashlight readily available on your person in order to accomplish these tasks. Your note-taking begins when you're initially contacted to report to a crime scene. This could be whether you're at the police station or driving around in your vehicle, or if you're at home and you've been contacted by telephone at home. That's when you start gathering your notes. Begins with the name of the person who contacted you. Usually it'll be a supervisor from, if you're at home off duty, it'll be a supervisor from that's on duty at the station. If you're in the station in the crime scene office, it could be a telephone call from either a supervisor or the communication center, or if you're out driving around, it could be via your radio communications. You should log in somewhere on your notebook the time you were contacted and the time that you arrived at the crime scene itself. The preliminary case information, which as a detective or a crime scene technician you will receive from the initial responding officer, usually a uniformed patrol officer. He'll be able to furnish you the case number, the time he was dispatched, the time he arrived, and any observations that he made. Also, any other, you should list the other people who were present on the scene that you worked with. We've already talked about the responsibility for the patrol officers to start a crime scene log to document people in and out of the crime scene. Crime scene notes. These are your own personal notes that you'll be keeping to formulate your written report at a later date. Should contain observation you've made as a crime scene technician or crime scene investigator, any significant times, notes that are taken about the layout out of the scene, should be contained within those notes. Notes should be written in a bound notebook, like I stated earlier. Either the most suitable things are either a reporter's notebook or a stenographer's pad. Those that seem to be the easiest to use. And you should use ink, blue or black, not wild colors like pink or purple or green, but basic blue or black. One, because those are the most easiest to make copies of if they need to be copied for any reason. One thing that you should note on your initial arrival to the scene, and it's with the computer internet access, it's easier to do, would be the weather conditions. We used to call time and weather over our telephone and record the information from there, so you can still either do that or you can just look it up on the internet, and you can find out information about the temperatures at the time, wind direction, and observations about if it's raining and all that kind of stuff. With the easy access today of handheld recorders and cell phones that can be used for recording, some agencies allow the investigators to record their notes on audio recording devices. Now this is a agency decision. So some agencies may allow you to do that. Other agencies may prohibit it and require written notes. Sometimes there can be malfunctions with audio recordings, so they really don't want that information to get lost. But some agencies do allow you to do that. One of the advantages of that, leaves your hands free to process the scene as your notes are taken. But eventually those notes have to be transcribed into a written document. And in most cases, you're not going to have a secretary or clerk available to transcribe your notes, so that's something that you're going to would have to do on your own. So you may be just creating a double workload for yourself also if you do it in that manner. Photography is very important in this process of documenting a crime scene. The various types of photographs taken at a crime scene are to show the layout, the overview of the crime scene, the position of collected and uncollected evidence, and show the point of view of victims, suspects, and witnesses, and show the original conditions of items of evidence at the scene. We have a entire course dedicated to crime scene photography and also a digital processing course. So you're going to get an additional 8 weeks in this area. But during this course, the new students are going to get a little bit of taste of basic photography, and I'm going to be depending on several students in class who have already been using photography in the processing course to assist the new students in getting familiar with our taking photographs and with the equipment that we use. Film photography, not going to say much about this because agencies have basically done away with film photography because it's much easier to use digital. The same basic for photography, the same methods apply. It's just a different source of photography. Some of the names of things have been changed around, but most agencies now have done away with their photographic laboratories because they no longer need to use the chemicals, and everything's processed on the computer with various software programs. Digital photography is the method that is now used to collect photographs, or the other term would be images. A digital photograph is basically light going through the camera and being placed on a sensor, which is a microchip, and there's a lot of little elements that are called pixels that the light goes on to. The higher the pixel count and the larger the sensor, the higher quality of the photographic image that you're going to capture. We currently use, for our training purposes, the Nikon D3100, say 35 millimeter camera, and is it's digital. You have two lenses, a short lens, 40 millimeter lens, and then a 55 to 100 lens, I believe it is. And that's the camera you'll be trained on. Most cameras, there's not a whole lot of difference, but you'll be trained on that camera, and you should easily be able to transition to other digital cameras. There's also a starting to come about is a mirrorless cameras, which are more lightweight, and we'll explain the difference between those cameras when we get started. You could also take crime scene photographs with a regular point and shoot, as long as you have the various controls that you can adjust. And you could even take photographs with a iPhone or your cell phone, although the biggest problem there is they don't have the amount of pixels for quality purposes when the photographs are blown up. Most cell phones are only 5 to 8 pixels, where the newer cameras being used in digital cameras being used in the field are anywhere from the quality ones are anywhere from 12 to now over 20 pixels. So that's one of the downside of using telephones to take crime scene photos. And not going to go real in depth on this, but the pixels located on the sensor have an electric charge in them, and they pick up that information and they transfer it to a memory card. I have a little video that's going to we'll watch in class that'll show you how a DSL camera works on the internal parts. So that'll be more readily explained in class. And as I just previously stated, the number of pixels is related to the resolution of the picture. More pixels show better resolution. They're more detailed, and they're sharper. And these are called megapixels. So if you're ever out looking at a camera and you're looking, and you'll say, okay, this is a 20 megapixel camera, you know that's a pretty high quality camera. You'll be paying a good amount for that. In fact, I have a new Sony point and shoot camera that has a larger sensor than most point and shoot cameras, and it is in excess of 20 megapixels, but I paid a price for that. But it is a very quality little pocketable camera that you'll be seeing me use a lot in the classroom. Just a little additional information regarding cameras. Film cameras, those are the ones that you put the little film cartridge in. Some of you may never even have seen one because it's sort of a vintage camera. Some people still like to use it, but finding film and getting it developed, unless you do your own development, is difficult. In fact, at home we have about 30 to 40 film rolls that we never got developed, and from various types of cameras, to those little box Instamatic cameras to other film. But there's a place in California that we can that I found that I can send film to from the film cameras, and they'll develop it. It's sort of interesting to see film that's that old and trying to recall it, seeing the things that you captured way back in the early days, mostly in my wife and my children's case in the 70s and 80s. The cameras that I said earlier now that are previously that are being used are the digital cameras called digital single lens reflex, or DSLR, and you'll learn about what SLR means when we go through the anatomy of cameras. The thing about these two, the SLR cameras, DSLR cameras, is they allow you to use various accessories. You can change lenses on them. You have flash attachments. You have filters, and there's everything from neutral density filters to protective filters to filters that cause the scene to be darker to cut out some harsh sunlight, and there's even infrared filters, and that'll all be discussed later on in the photographic course. I touched upon this earlier. You're going to be doing manual adjustments with your camera, having to do with aperture, which is the opening of the lens, or how much light is let into the lens, the speed of the shutter, which has to do with how long the light is allowed to get into the lens and be placed on the sensor. All that affects the quality. You have to, lower shutter speeds are good for landscape and portrait, where faster shutter speeds are good for capturing emotion. But that'll all be taken care of later on. You'll get a little bit of knowledge of that in the hands-on part of this course. Okay, we'll talk a little bit about lenses. Camera lens, they bend the light to focus an image on the digital microchip or sensor that's inside the camera. The lens focal length is the distance between the center of the lens on the outside and a straight line to the sensor on the back of the camera, which is a microchip. And they come in various lengths, the cameras do, and some of them have zoom capabilities. That means they can zoom from like 55 millimeter out to 85 millimeter or 90 millimeter. It depends on the camera. The normal lens, for the normal eye, they say that the lens that is most normal is the 50 millimeter lens, and it sees about the same data that your eye perceives when you're looking at things through your eye. A focal length of 50 to 55, and it's used mostly for photographs that need to be taken of crime scenes, and it can show about like half of a wall, and focusing in and taking pictures, close-up pictures, distance pictures, are a combination of using your lens and also the movement of your feet to move yourself to different locations to take a photograph. Continuing on our discussion of lenses, telephoto lens is something that's used for capture images at a distance. These are the type of cameras that they use when filming sporting events. Cameras that you use that you use when you're doing surveillance. Not a whole lot of need for telephoto lens in crime scene work, but the telephoto lens it brings in things in a distance in closer. I like to photograph baseball games, so I'll use telephoto lens for that. I can sit at Tropicana Field and use a telephoto lens. I have one that goes up to 600 millimeters, and I can capture fairly close-up images of the players on the field from in the cheap seats in the stadium. Anything with a focal length of more than 100 millimeters and is used to magnify images. So 100 millimeters or more would be considered a telephoto lens. I've seen telephoto lenses that are in magazines that are up to 1,000. It takes sometimes 2 tripods to just hold the lens, let alone the camera. Wide-angle lenses, those would be shorter focal length lenses. Those are used for landscape photography, sometimes other things like street photography, and sometimes in crime scene photography, but that would be considered an extra lens. The closer you get in with a wide-angle lens, the less area you're going to cover. The further you step back, the more area you're going to cover. Focal length of 35 millimeter. Covers a lot more area than does a normal lens. So if you have a 35 millimeter lens compared to the normal lens of 50 millimeter, you're going to photograph a broader perspective of the scene, but it will not be as close up. It'll be as it would be if you're using a 50 millimeter. A macro lens. Macro lenses are used for close-up photography, have a focal length of less than 50 millimeter, and they're used for evidence type work where you're going to be doing comparisons. Let's say you're taking a photograph of a fingerprint, of a tool mark, of something that you're going to use for identification, and there's a system, a method that we use for that, but that's what we use our 40 millimeter lens for, is for close-up photography. There's people that in the civilian world and commercial world that practice macro photography to photograph flowers and insects and like jewelry and things like that. Then you have multi-purpose lenses, and those would be your lenses that can be zoomed in and out. That's what our 55 millimeter zoom lens is used for, because we can zoom it from 55 to, I believe, 85 millimeters. So that just is the advantage of using a camera, whether it's a digital camera, single lens digital reflex digital camera, or a mirrorless camera, where you have the ability to change lens. It gives you far more variety in the use of lenses. Where if you have just using a point and shoot lens, you have usually a short zooming focal length. The camera I was referring to earlier that I have can zoom from 24 out to 70 millimeters, which is good, for a regular camera. That what I'm using it for is good. I could even use it for what they call street photography. That's where you go around and taking pictures of things taking place on the street. All right, aperture and shutter speed. The students who have had prior courses involving photography, this should be old news to you, because you should already have knowledge of this and how to use it in your photography. The camera aperture is measured by the diameter of the opening, and it determines how much light is let into the camera. There's a little diaphragm inside the lens that opens and closes to a certain diameter based on the aperture setting, to allow the light, and we're just going to say to the sensor, because that's what we're using mostly. We're going to be using is DSLR cameras, not film cameras. On the digital camera, you adjust the aperture by setting the f number or f stop. The lower the f number setting, the wider the aperture, the more light that is let in. So that'll be a f1.8 aperture setting will let in far more light than will a setting of f11. So the lower the number, the more light that is let in. You would think it would be the opposite way, but it's not. The higher the number, the less light is let in. Let in, but it also affects something that we call depth of field, which we'll talk about when we start using cameras. The shutter speed is the length of time that the light is allowed to be on the camera. That's measured in seconds. Shutter speed is a fraction. You see when you see shutter speed of 200, that's 1/200th of a second that the shutter is allowed to be open. And for time-lapse photography, things like that, you can use lower shutter speeds to gather in more, to allow the camera to gather in more information. If you're shooting sports or movement, unless you have a higher shutter speed, you'll be getting a blur. They say walking, you're photographing somebody who is walking, 1/250th of a second is a good setting. If you're doing taking pictures of race cars or football games, baseball games, you're going to be up into the 1/500th of a second, all the way up to 1/800,000th of a second, depending on what your camera allows you to do. Okay, touching a little bit on depth of field. The depth of field is the amount of a photograph that is in focus from foreground in front of this object that you're photographing to behind the object you are photographing. How much of that is in focus in the camera is called depth of field. The smaller the aperture, remember, the smaller the aperture means a higher f-stop. The greater the depth of field will be. So at a depth of field of f1.8, f2, f4, f8, your depth of field will not be that great. When you move up into f11 and higher, you will start being able to see depth of field. That means items, scenery in front of the your object that you're photographing to behind the object. You're going to be photographing. More of that data will be in focus. For crime scene photography, it's recommended that you have a depth of field where 1/3 in front of the subject of the photograph to 2/3 behind the subject of the photograph is considered the proper depth of field, and that's just something that you'll have to learn through experience working with the cameras, and you'll get sufficient camera time during this course and all of your courses. Okay, now we're going to address DSLR modes. These really serve, except for one of them, serves no function in crime scene photography. They're made for people, maybe you've gone out and taken photographs for your own personal use, and you see these little choices that you have on the camera, and there's various symbols available for night scene or sports scene or portrait, food photography, things like that. Those aren't the things that we use in crime scene photography. The auto mode is something that some people use. It's not recommended in crime scene. It's basically where the camera is selecting all the settings that are required. The DSLR cameras are basically little computers, and they read light and scenery and face detection and things like that, and it makes all your settings for you. Sometimes that's also called program mode. Other things, like I just talked about, with sports mode, night mode, landscape mode, and portrait mode. You're not going to be using these in class. You're going to be using your own, making your own settings. We'll start out in maybe auto mode to just get started. Then we'll quickly transition to aperture mode, which is the most common mode used by professional photographers, and also photographers that do a lot of sports. They may be in shutter mode, but then we're going to try to get you working in manual mode. That's where you control all the aspects of the camera, and if you can shoot in manual mode and create a good quality image, then you should be able to use any other mode on a camera, and you should be able to use any type of camera once you master the basics of manual mode in a DSLR camera. Illumination. Illumination is another word for lighting. Lighting has a color temperature. It can be either hot or cold light. A hot light has a bluer hue to it. Cold light is more reddish orange hue. they're measured in something called Kelvin, Kelvin, and the more you get into to using cameras, if you want to get really in depth, then you'll start being concerned about the Kelvin temperatures. But the DSLR cameras of today are very good at adjusting the color temperatures for photography, and a lot of people just use what we call auto white balance, or there's other settings in there depending on the type of light. Now, settings in the camera for light, and you don't need to know this right now, is tungsten. That's your regular light bulb in a house. Fluorescent, like we have in our classrooms. If you go outside and it's on, you've got sunny day, then you've got cloudy day. You can set all those temperatures in there, or you can just use the auto white balance, which is a pretty effective means of capturing the correct temperature. Now, a DSLR camera, as I said, is a computer, and it sends you point your camera at something you're going to take a photograph of, and it sends a signal out to the object that you've set to take a photograph of, and it reflects back into the camera, telling the camera what the best light will be based on reflective light that's being reflected off the object you're photographing. Ambient light is the light that's falling onto the subject that you're photographing, coming from either a light source or from the sun that's directly on that. There are professional photographers use light meters where they can either measure reflectively like the camera does, or if they want to get ambient light, they take their light meter and set it up next to the object that they're going to be photographing, whether it's a tree or flowers or a person, and get a measurement of the ambient light. We do not use the only light meters we use are the in-camera ones for the purpose of this, and I've never seen crime scene personnel use anything but the reflective light. The handheld metering is more for professionals. I have a handheld meter, an inexpensive one, and that I mess around with, and it shows basically the same thing that you get on your camera for reflective light. And the light meter from the camera just allows you to measure the amount of light that's in the shot, so you can make adjustments with your apertures and with your shutter speeds. Then you have flash units, which are external attachments. The little flash unit that comes with it, with your digital camera, that is usually a pop-up flash that's stored internally within the camera, and then you release it to open it up. It's not that effective. They're fixed. You cannot adjust the power, so they come out with the same power, and their distance of coverage is very short. It's sort of funny when you watch people, if you're watching a sporting event or a concert on TV, or you're at that location, and you see all these people pulling out their cameras and taking photographs with their little handheld point and shoot camera, and you see all the flashes going off. The flash is not doing a bit of good, because it's only effective to less than 30 feet, depending on the quality of the camera. Now, external flashes, we have an external flash for our cameras. which is, there's a hot shoe on top of the camera, and you'll learn about that when we talk about nomenclature. That has a cable that goes to the flash attachment, and we can do some adjustments with that flash as far as the power, the amount of light it emits. We can make adjustments to that. We can also can use flash to help illuminate when we're taking photographs of tire tracks or shoe prints, or even fingerprints for oblique lighting. And there's also other lighting that's available for this. If you have a smartphone, you can get a photographic lighting that can be reflected from your phone in various colors, or on your iPad. There's apps that have that can assist you in creating basically oblique lighting for evidentiary things. So you'll get some practice and familiarity with using flashes during this course and the remainder of the program. Filters. Filters are various pieces of glass of different colors that you screw over your onto the front of your camera lens. They can be used to block various wavelengths of color from being recorded on the digital sensor. One of the most easy ones to explain would be the infrared filter, where it blocks things that are white show black, and things that are black show white. Some people specialize, or that's a hobby, to do infrared photography. There's filters that eliminate the amount of light coming into a camera because it's so bright outside, or if you're doing photographs around sandy beaches with water or ocean. That's some difficult photography, so you would use filters there to filter out some of the harsh light that would be on the scene. There's bypass filters that only allow a small range of light to reach the sensor. Mostly we deal with sensors that deal with harsh lighting. We do, all of our cameras are supposed to have, there's some that are missing now, have a neutral density filter on them, which is used to protect the lens. If you put a neutral density filter on the front of the lens and just keep it there, if you happen to drop the lens, what will break will be the neutral density filter, and the camera lens will stay intact. Don't practice this, but it's used there. It's used to keep the actual camera lens from breaking if it's dropped, or from getting destructive scratches on the lens. These neutral density filters that we use are only like cost $7 to $8 for the ones that we buy. So I'd rather break one of those than break a full camera lens that we would have. It would cost us hundreds of dollars to replace. Tripods. Tripods is an apparatus that has 3 legs that extend from it, and you place your camera or you mount your camera onto the tripod. It's useful for taking landscape photography, to keep you from moving the camera, hand holding a camera at a low shutter speed, anything from lower than from 1/60th of a second or slower. I require that you use a tripod, because at that speed, any slight movement, including breathing, muscle movements, can cause a blur. It's just going to require extra work. So when you're shooting evidence photography for things that are going to be used for comparison purposes, whether it's a bullet projectile, fingerprint, tool mark, any other thing that can be used for comparison purposes, you're going to be required to use a tripod. Also with shoe prints and tire tracks, you're going to be required to use a tripod to document those photographs. Because it eliminates the possibility of blurring, and not everybody has the same ability and control over their hands to maintain something steady enough for a shot that requires no movement. So now, I have students say, "Oh, I can do that." Well, you may be able to do it, but you're not going to do it in our class, because you won't be able to do it when you get into the field. You're going to have to follow normal protocol, and protocol is that on evidentiary photograph that you photograph items at a 1/60th or less, and that you use a tripod. Tripod is useful, especially the tripod. We have the same tripod for each camera. We have 6 tripods, and they're adjustable. They have a ball head on them where you can adjust the location of the camera, the direction the camera is pointing, and also you can adjust the each leg of the tripod to a certain length, just in case you're in on some uneven terrain, where you have to manipulate the camera into different positions to be able to get a good shot. And when you're shooting evidence photography and most crime scene photography, you want to ensure that your images are at a shot at a 90-degree angle. So the object that you're shooting is parallel to your lens. Okay, the crime scene photography log. The students have had prior classes with photography, are aware of this item, and it's a document that's required. It can be used in court. It's because it's public record. All criminal cases eventually become public record, and all it does is give documentation about each photograph that is taken. You list it starting with the first shot on down, and the information you'll be putting on there will be the item, the various camera settings that you use, and a location for any special notes. In the film era, you had to do this each time you shot a photo at the crime scene. In today's era, with the digital imaging, when you pull up an image during processing, there's metadata that is located on each digital image in what we call a sidecar that will tell you the date and time the photograph was taken and the various settings that you had it on, whether it was what the aperture setting was, the film length, focal length of the camera, the shutter speed, and the ISO of the camera. And ISO is a term we haven't used previously, but that has to do with the megapixels on the camera, and that'll be something you'll learn a little bit later. But you're either going to have to fill it out at the crime scene for each photograph as you take it, or you can reconstruct it back when you process it. Remember, you do not delete any photographs, crime scene photographs. If you take a bad photograph, it stays. You don't delete it. And that'll be, if you delete it, it will be recorded that you did delete a photograph, which of course the defense attorneys can then say, well, why was this deleted? Is it something that you didn't want that would help the defendant, things like that. So that's one of the integrity issues that you have. The very first photograph that you take prior to doing any crime scene photography is your identification photograph. It's a little label that identifies the case number that you're assigned to the investigation, the date, time, the photographer's name, ID number if you have one, and that's basically the information that is required. You can either write it down on a piece of paper, legibly printed, and take a photograph, make that your first photograph. Some people just make up a little template on their cell phones, and then all they do is fill in the information for each crime scene that they do or exercise that we do. But anytime we do a photographic project, whether it's a crime scene project or other project, you're going to be required to do the crime scene identifier to get you in the habit of doing that, because that's what you will be doing when you get into the field. And I've already addressed the information that's required in the on the crime scene. You're gonna have your case number. It's the number that's issued by the communication division, the type of scene, date and location, and the type of camera. Some agencies, large agencies, not only would be the type of camera, but camera numbers have different serial numbers. And some agencies, very larger agencies, may have different makes and models of cameras. One person may be using a Nikon. Somebody else agency may be using another person in the same unit may be using a Canon or a Sony. So you have to document which camera exactly was being used to take the photographs, and along with the name of the person that was responsible for taking the photographs. And I already covered this. For each photograph, the log records your f-stop, your shutter speed, your ISO settings, and any other, there's information, area on the line to write any additional notes about the photograph if there was something unusual that occurred. Okay, a little bit more about crime scene photography. The photographs you're going to be taking are going to record the area in which the crime actually took place and any other adjacent areas where other important parts of the crime may have occurred. You're going to try to do it in an where the scene has not been altered. Of course, we've talked about the medical people and the initial arriving officers, so there's already going to be some contamination, but from the time that you get there, you start taking your pictures before you go in and start moving and collecting and documenting evidence. Each crime scene should be photographed in some sort of a logical progression. Usually we start from the outside and move in, and with our close-up and evidence photography being the last things that we do, trying to show a story to the jury if the case gets to court, to give them perspective on the case. Now, you take a lot of photographs at crime scenes. You may take hundreds of photographs of a crime scene, but when you get to trial, the defense attorney and the prosecuting attorneys are going to go through look at your crime scene photographs, and they're going to cut them down to several, probably less than a handful, that will be presented in court. Sometimes photographs cannot be used. You'll learn this in your legal courses. Cannot be used because it could be prejudicial to the defendant. But that should not keep you from taking photographs. This day and age with the digital photography, you can just take as many photographs as are required. Initially, the photographs are going to be placed on a little sheet with a number of thumbnails put together on that sheet, called a contact sheet, and then detectives may look at it, or your prosecutor, and they'll determine which photographs they want to look at. Now, important thing to remember, we're now big into cold case investigations. So the photographs you take today may be put away in a file if the case is unsolved, and then needed later if the case is determined to be pulled out for additional cold case investigation. And the only documentation, the crime scene is not going to be in the same condition. If it was in a locality, there may have been construction or renovations taking place. So the only thing that they have to look at is your photographs to get a perspective of the crime scene and the evidence and the position of evidence on a crime scene. Also, if the case is sent to profilers for some reason, it's thought to be linked to some sort of a serial crime, the profilers will be viewing your photographs. So you want to be taking, each photograph you take should be the best quality that you can have it. As you should know by now, profilers don't usually fly around on their G5 jets to the crime scene and do active investigations. Most of the time, profilers are sitting in their office at Quantico, reading reports and looking at crime scene diagrams and crime scene photographs. So your photographs and the other duties you take care of at a crime scene can be very important, not only to immediate solvability of the case, but later on if it becomes part of a cold case investigation or part of a serial murder or sexual battery case investigation. All right, continuing on with the various types of photographs that are taken at the crime scene. First are the overview photographs. Those are your basically related to what we would call in the commercial world would be your overview photographs, landscape photographs showing the entire scene and surrounding area, points of entry and exit are taken. Now, one thing I always did in photographs, and I know other crime scene technicians did this, is you take your first photograph, of course, is going to be the photographic identifier, and then take a photograph of the nearest street sign that shows the name of the street, location that the crime scene is on, and then if it's visible on the mailbox or on the front of the house, the numerical address of the location. That just further identifies the location, and then you start taking your overview photographs from outside the border of the scene, taking at various angles. Another thing I would do is I would overlap my photographs. Sometimes you can people want to put the photographs together to get a better perspective. Medium range means you're moving in closer to the scene. Let's say let's say the crime took place inside of a residence. Well, you're going to take a photograph of the exterior of the residence. Then you're going to move into the doorway, take a photograph from the doorway, and then you're going to move into, if the immediate area is the living room, you're going to move into there, and then you're going to start moving into each area of the home to take photographs. And then when you get to where the scene of the crime is, let's say the body is laying in the kitchen, you're going to do the medium range photographs of the kitchen itself before you start moving in and taking pictures of items of evidence on the scene. And an item of evidence is also the deceased body. And a photograph of the center of the scene, and that's where you get to the center of where the body would be located, to give people a perspective of the body and any evidence that's in relationship to the body. Continuing on with our discussion of crime scene photography, the last photographs you're going to take are your close-up photographs. They show things that are in greater detail, more detail about the any tools or weapons that are used or in the commission of the crime, and also just for identification purposes. You're going to take those photographs, as we addressed earlier, at a 90-degree angle, both with and without an evidence marker. Evidence markers are those little yellow placards with numbers on them, so to label the evidence. For three-dimensional items like footprints or tire tracks or shoe prints, tool marks, that would be a three-dimensional photograph, and you may have to use oblique lighting, which means holding your lighting at an angle, whether you're using a flash or just a flashlight of some sort, in order to capture better detail of the impression. So the 4 photographs required at the crime scene are the overview photograph, the medium range photograph, the close-up photograph, and a close-up photograph with a scale. That would be for your evidentiary photos, whether you're taking a photograph of a fingerprint that's in blood on the wall, or a latent fingerprint that you're taking a photograph because it could be destroyed during the lifting process, tool marks, footprints and shoe prints, and tire impressions. When you take those, you take one without and one with a scale in place. A scale is just a ruler. One side is in meters, and the other side is in inches. And we also have some of those that are available that are very short, like 1 inch long, and they're disposable, so they're on a roll, and you just pull them off the roll, use them, and then you throw them away after you're done with it. But we also have plastic rulers that come with our kits also. All right, some special crime scene photography issues. Night photography, especially exterior, outside. You may have to have external lighting brought in. Most crime units, lab units, have external lighting available. Sometimes you may have to get more powerful lighting. And also you may have to paint with light. Painting with light is sort of fun. We have to do it at night or in the dark, but you find the object that you're going to photograph, and you have a long exposure time, meaning the lens is left open for a long period of time, and you take a light and you paint the object that you're photographing with light, and it'll show up. We have some videos we can show on that, and if we get a chance, we'll practice that. I know one of the other classes that worked on putting together evidence exhibits did some painting with light, and it's very effective, and it's something that's sort of fun to do. Indoor photography, photographs of the neighborhood, points of entry and exit, the walls, the floors, the ceiling. Sometimes there's evidence on the ceiling. Let's say somebody is shot in the head at an upward angle, there could be blood and other biological materials hanging from the ceiling. You also want to take photographs so the scene can possibly be reconstructed, rebuilt in some sort of a model fashion. Outdoor photography, with this day and age, with all of our digital information available and a lot of our cameras, not the ones that we currently use, but the newer cameras that come out in the last several years, you're able to even record your geolocation, your latitude and longitude of where the picture was taken from. And there's some real sophisticated cameras out now that take full 360-degree panoramas. The Polk County Sheriff's Department just purchased one that they're getting used to using. They said we could come down to there to take a look, but the only issue we have is the time that they're available, which is late in the early afternoon. So we may have to see what we can do about that. The videotaping of crime scenes has also become in vogue in the last 5 to 10 years, as the equipment has gotten gotten lighter and more easy to use. So just as with crime scene photography, you should do take the same type of photographs, doing an overview, a medium range, and a close-up range. Now, a narrated crime scene video combines photography and notes. Some agencies recommend that you do not do any voice recording on a video. Sometimes you pick up information in the background, statements by other people that you would not want to have available to the defense or the jury. So it's probably pretty safe to take it without recording audio, or that maybe only one person or two people be present and everybody else be excluded from the vicinity of the videographer. So you have to be very careful if you are recording audio about statements. Police work is a dark topic when you're investigating homicides and other crimes, and sometimes officers or detectives can to relieve tension, to cope with the scene, may make remarks just to relieve that tension that would not be understood by the public and then can be exploited by the defense attorneys. So you have to make sure that any videotaping is done either without audio or done on under very controlled conditions. Now, this textbook addresses cameras that when we've developed DSLRs as they've gone along, they have the capability not only to take still images, but you can also take videos. But they mentioned that the videos are of poor quality and the photographs are poor quality. Well, in the last 2 to 3 years, that has greatly improved. Now professionals are using not only their DSLR cameras to produce quality photographs, but they're also using it to film videos. So the quality has greatly increased in both the ability to produce images, both still and moving images. I've got a couple cameras that I can use. They're SLR or they're mirrorless cameras, and you can use while you're filming. You can also take a photograph, and the filming continues on, and the image, but it also creates a still photograph, and there's no problem with the quality of the photograph because there's sufficient megapixels for the resolution of the photograph. But at this point in time, unless the agency you work for allows that, you should probably should refrain from taking still pictures while videotaping from the same camera. But the agency that you're working for, the people that work there, will know the quality of the cameras and whether that is an acceptable method to use. Okay, now we're going to leave the area of photography and move into crime scene sketches. So, been a very important part of the criminal investigative process, particularly in homicides for years and years, decades. Crime scene sketches are drawn initially in a rough hand by rough hand, but your sketch is going to show the layout of the crime scene, relationships between objects and features or bodies within the scene. It'll help be clarified. It'll supplement your photographs, and sketch will complement each other. Measurements, the distance, and also showing the topography or the layout of the land on outdoor scenes. Maybe depicting paths of entry and exit to the scene. And trying to attempt to demonstrate the various eyewitness or victim statements incorporated into the scene as much as possible. Now, the initial getting the measurements and drawing the objects and getting the exact measurements is very important. Some agencies, you have to draw the final sketch by hand using graph paper and various implements. You are also at our campus going to be taught how to do this in a software program called CAD Zone, which allows you to reconstruct a computer based sketch from your notes and measurements, and you'll be able to do 3D. Eventually you'll learn 3D, how to do 3D drawings and or sketches with this software program. Mr. Teague is our instructor on that. He's a certified he's certified in the use and a certified instructor. Once you have completed the number of hours that are required and taken a test on CAD Zone, he's authorized to issue you a certificate of training in CAD Zone, which you can use as part of your resume or your portfolio. A lot of agencies are transitioning from the method of doing hand-drawn final sketches to moving into computerized sketching with CAD Zone and some other software programs. So he'll be doing that. He does that on Fridays. Not sometimes, due to his schedule, he doesn't do it every Friday, but he does that on Fridays. So you'll be working, all of you will be working with Mr. Teague on part of the morning on Fridays on learning how to use and further develop your skills in using CAD Zone. The rough sketch. This is the sketch that you'll be doing in the field during the crime scene investigation. It's created at the scene. It contains your accurate depiction of the various dimensions of the scene, the location of evidence, features, those types of issues. You'll be doing measurements, especially if it's to various locations. The most common method of measurements is triangulation. We'll do some exercises on that. The people that have already been working in this program for the last several months already know how to do this, so they'll be able to assist the new students in both doing measurements by triangulation and doing rough sketches. The rough sketch is what you will take back with you to eventually put it into a CAD Zone final sketch, computerized sketch. I talked about that in the last slide. We do have, each one of our PCs has a CAD Zone software program on it, so there'll be sufficient ones. I think we've got 12 or 13 PCs, so we'll rotate people through that, but everybody's going to get training on taking your rough sketch information and putting into a CAD Zone sketch. Your rough sketch information should have, just like you have a photo identifier for the first image on your crime scene for your photographs. Your rough sketch will have a title block with basically the same information that's on the photo identifier, the case number, the location of the scene, the name of the person creating the sketch. You'll also show on there the cardinal north location on the map, so people can orient themselves to the sketch. You'll have a legend that will help identify evidence that you've placed into the sketch. I already addressed the compass showing the north direction, and then you have the body of the sketch, which contains the details and measurements of the sketch. Sometimes the measurements are also put in on the legend, showing the distance from point 1 to point 2, etc. Other than triangulation, there's other ways to do measurements using baseline, which is having a straight line for a distance and then measuring the distance of each item of evidence to that baseline. There's also polar coordinates, which requires a piece of equipment to do that, something that we don't currently use, but some agencies have it, some don't, but it's something that you would be taught on the job. But as long as you have the basics down of doing rough sketches, you should be able to successfully do sketch by using hand and tape measures. You should be able to transition into any other method of crime scene sketching. Okay, the final or finished crime scene sketch. Finished sketches are created from your rough sketch and data that you complete at the crime scene itself. But this is when you do your final sketch. It's drawn to scale with emphasis on the appearance of the final sketch. As I stated earlier, the basic current standard method is using computer-aided drafting, or CAD, and we use the software program CAD Zone, which is a part of a packet that the police use, Crime Zone. They also have one for the fire department called Fire Zone for arson cases that are used to create your finished or final sketch. And as I said previously, CAD Zone allows you to do your sketches in 3D or three-dimensional final sketches. All right, that's the end of Chapter 3. Gave you an overview of the various ways of recording crime scenes. We talked a lot about photography. Photography is for those of you that want to get involved as crime scene technicians, or even some doing some things inside in a crime lab. Your ability to use cameras is going to be a significant portion of your job, and the better that you are at mastering photography during this program, the better off you're going to be when trying to sell yourself as a potential employee of an agency. And you're going to get a lot of information about crime scene sketching during this course, doing sketching and working on CAD Zone. Anytime you're in at least one of the lower level courses, every Friday you'll be doing, almost every Friday you'll be doing CAD Zone with Mr. Teague. At this point, just like on the last several chapters, I would suggest that you now read your chapter 3, pay attention to key terms, look at the review and answer the review questions at the end of the chapter. Again, can't emphasize anymore that your quiz questions and midterm and final exam questions will be primarily drawn from those questions that are in the back of each chapter. So you know in advance that's where it's coming from. So it's your responsibility to be prepared to answer those questions. We'll also be reviewing the questions in class. Okay, that ends chapter 3.